Hey everybody! Okay, so this is a recording, a re-recording of a webinar that I gave a couple of nights ago for Tuition Fit and Next College Student Athlete. And I gotta tell you, just pulling off this webinar was sort of an amazing, didn't think we'd pull it off event. Some of you might know that about 2 weeks ago in Iowa, we had 128-mile-an-hour winds come flying across Illinois and Iowa, knocked out trees, power lines, internet, cell phone towers, power all out. There's big chunks of the state where I think there's still power outages. So we didn't have anything for a week. And I didn't know if we were going to pull this off. When we finally got to be able to pull this off and record or just broadcast a webinar, we didn't have the bandwidth to record it. So, and if you're a real tech person and you're going to say, well, it's not about the bandwidth, I'm sorry, I got the wrong terminology. But the reality here is we just were able to get the thing broadcast. And then I promised everyone I would record a much better version. In other words, you can understand every word that I say, version of the webinar, and then I would send it out. So this is the recording of that webinar. I've got the questions that people asked, and I'm going to try to insert those in the webinar best I can. But I hope this is useful, and thank you so much for sticking around and giving this thing a chance and being patient with us as we just try to pick up after getting hit by an inland hurricane that nobody in Iowa has ever seen before. So, all right, here we go. So how to guarantee that every school on your final college list will fit your price range. I'm Mark Salisbury. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tuition Fit. I've got 25 years in higher ed. I've been a coach, I've been a dean, I've been a scholar and researcher, I've been a consultant. I know how higher education works from the inside out, and I know how college admissions works from the inside out. And after all of that, and all that experience, a couple of years ago, I decided, along with my co-founder, Kimberly, that we were going to try to fix something really important, which was to fix the lack of college price transparency with my company called Tuition Fit. So what I want to do is walk you through a whole bunch of stuff that will set up a way of thinking about the college search that ensures that every school that you apply to, if you get in, you can actually consider that school because the price you'll get offered will still fit your price range. So one thing to start with is, I love this phrase, start with the end in mind. And sometimes it's really important to back up and say, well, what exactly is the end? What is the thing that we're supposed to have in mind? Because in the world of the college search, we oftentimes get it confused. The goal is not just to get into college and to start college. And the goal isn't just to finish college. That might look like some of you when you cross that finish line just to get your degree. That's not the goal either. The goal is that on the day after you graduate, you have no constraints as a student. You've learned a ton. You've matured a lot. And you can take any opportunity that really looks like a fantastic next step for you. You can take that opportunity. You're not being held back by, oh, I can't afford that job because it doesn't pay me enough. Or I can't afford to move across the country because I don't have the money for that. When you graduate from college, the very next day, you want to be able to say, I've got no constraints. I really could do anything. That is the ideal goal. And that's the whole reason why you do this college search in the first place, is that goal of what's going to happen the day after I graduate. And I think that's really important to start with, because everything else sort of spills out from there. Now, when we talk about opportunities after college, they come in all shapes and sizes, which today I think can replace those two words with locations and salaries. A lot of students that graduate from college right now, you know what they'd love to do? They would love to go to work for a startup. Some really cool idea that could change the world if it works. But guess what? Startups don't pay very well. It's just the nature of the beast. But that shouldn't stop you from being able to chase your passion. And today, the biggest constraint, the biggest thing that holds people back isn't that they're not able to do it. It's that they've got debt payments that they got to start paying off as soon as they graduate. And those payments mean I got to make enough money in my salary to make those payments. And what does that mean? Well, I can't take that job at the startup. I can't travel across the country and go for it. I can't take that job with Teach for America or some other thing. I can't go to grad school because I can't afford grad school right now. Because the debt that I've got means I got to get a job that pays me enough just so I can start making those payments. And that's a soul crusher for so many college graduates. So that's the thing we don't want to have happen. We want no constraints. So the ideal college search outcome then ends up is that you find a college opportunity where you can maximize your value, you get the most out of a college experience, and you can minimize price. Pay the least possible for the most possible. Now, it doesn't mean you just pay the lowest price college no matter what. A lot of times that's not a great setup either. But you got to find that balance. And for everyone in the college search process, the thing that frustrates people the most is that you can't assess value until you know what your actual price is going to be. Otherwise, value is just an abstract concept. And we get all kinds of hooked up on that school's got this feature and that school's got that feature. And those features might look really cool, but they're not really necessarily contributing to value after you graduate. But as long as you don't know what the actual price is, those things suddenly take on a whole nother life of their own and look really exciting. We need to be able to see what our actual price is going to be so that we can assess whether that school's worth looking at more. So for most of us, we've been getting college brochures, I don't know, for a couple years by now. And if you're like most people, you've seen all these brochures, and at some point you went, you know what, I can't tell the difference. They all look the same. You might even think you saw the same kid in about 20 different brochures. And I'm not sure that's not true. But at some point, you just want to know which colleges will fit my price range, because those are the ones I want to look at. I don't want to go look at a school that looks great, all of this kind of wonderful stuff, then I find out 6 months from now that I got in, but I can't afford it. Then you just wasted all that time and money. So a lot of us just want to know, just give me some ballpark, some sense of which colleges will fit my price range. So just to back up maybe for some of us, and maybe for some of us this is brand new, but I'm going to walk you through something that's a reality of the college search process. You can have two schools that both have great features, look really wonderful, you apply to both of them, and find out 4 months later that one of them is asking you to pay $60,000 a year and the other is asking you to pay $20,000 a year. And that's a huge difference. And that's just for 1 year. That's not even for 4 years. When you start the college search process, you start with about 4,400 colleges and universities across the country. And you start exploring your college possibilities. In that early phase, do you get to find out what your actual price is going to be there? Some of you might say, well, there's a net price calculator. I'd ask you if you're going to go to every single college net price calculator and run your own assessment. But the other problem is that turns out net price calculators, they're not all that accurate. So no, you're not going to find out then. You start visiting campuses, you've narrowed it down a bit, you're trying to get a sense of a place. Would you find out your actual price then? No. How about you've now decided to apply to 10 schools? What about then? Nada. You still don't know what your price is actually going to be. It's not until you get accepted to maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 colleges and universities that you finally find out what your price is going to be at each of those schools. A couple of weeks, maybe a month later, they want you to decide. Well, like that, how do you manage all of that in that short window of time? And wouldn't you have liked to have known what your price was going to be for each school at the beginning of the process so that you could be sure that you've really been talking to the best possible schools for you? Well, that's not how the college search is designed. Without knowing the actual prices, we can't compare value and we can't compare return on investment. And that really makes the college search a very difficult process for a lot of folks. In fact, most folks. So how do you guarantee that your final college list will fit your price range? Well, I'm going to talk about 3 different ways to sort of attack this problem. First, let's establish a framework for long-term plans. Second, let's put your undergraduate costs in context. And then third, we're going to focus on the colleges where your actual price allows you to maximize value. So let's talk about establishing a framework for long-term plans. I don't mean, by the way, that you now have to plan out exactly what's going to happen to you in your early adult life and have it down to a T. I just mean, like, let's have a framework. So first of all, let's not ask where you want to be when you go to college or when you graduate. Where do you want to be when you're 25 years old, a couple of years after undergrad? Because I think that is important to sort of put this in real context. In order to get there, will you need grad school? And third, will you need other experiences to get where you want to go? There's other stuff that can help you develop as a young person, as a young adult, that don't have anything to do with college. Secondly, let's put the undergrad costs in context. Will you need money for more schooling? There's certainly some graduate programs where you can go and you don't have to pay anything because you get an assistantship, you're teaching while you're going to grad school, you're doing research while you're going to grad school in a professor's lab. But there are other graduate programs, law school, med school, an MBA, where you got to pay a lot for that. You're going to need more money for more schooling. And at what point does debt start to inhibit your plans? Debt's not a horrible thing, but owing $50 a month is different than owing $500 a month. $50 a month, you might be able to swing. $500, now you really have to find a salary that can allow you to pay that. And third, how willing and able are you to supplement your learning and growth? College isn't a thing that it's a vacuum, and it's not a bubble. You can do a lot of stuff outside of the institution that you're attending to supplement your learning and growth, but you have to be willing to do it, and you have to be able to stick with it. Is that something that you're able to do? Because if you are, you might be able to do some things that would reduce your cost. If you're not, you still want to graduate, you still want to learn, so maybe college is just going to cost you a little bit more. And that's okay, because the goal is you got to finish, right? So with that said, let's maximize value and minimize price. One, use the price range you've established. You've thought really hard about what's the price range that I need to stay with. Secondly, identify the colleges that fit your price range. There's a whole bunch of colleges, turns out, that are going to fit your price range. It might not be the ones that you've heard of yet, but that's okay. There's a ton of great schools out there that I guarantee you've never heard of. And then once you've identified those schools, then you're going to start to explore in depth the graduation rates, the job placement rates, the chances to learn and grow. So all of that to say, that's a great way to start framing so that every single college that you look at that is in your final list is a school that you can actually afford. Of course, the big question is, well, where are those actual prices? Because that's the thing we all really need, right? Well, that's why I started Tuition Fit. Because all the actual prices are sitting in the award letters that students receive every year when they apply to college. And colleges organize their pricing in a pretty straightforward formula. So if we know just a little bit about the student and we know the price that that college is offered, we can reverse engineer it. But we've got all these award letters sitting on kitchen tables all over the country. So what we've been doing for the past couple of years is getting students and families to share those letters to Tuition Fit. We anonymize and we organize those prices so that you can go to Tuition Fit and essentially use a Kelley Blue Book for college prices to see what other students just like you or other students just like your son or daughter are being asked to pay at colleges all over the country. So, if you're at the beginning of the college search process, or if you're a rising senior right now, you're just about to start your senior year in high school, you're still thinking about your college list, and you only want to look at schools that you can afford. So go to tuitionfit.org and you can get free access of a list of schools in your price range, all pulled from last year's financial aid award offer letters that students just like you have shared. So you set up an account, some basic demographics, high school GPA or a test score if you've got one, which today not a lot of people have. And then you'll need the EFC, an expected family contribution, from a FAFSA estimator. You don't do the FAFSA yet, but you can do an EFC calculator. There's 100 of them online. They're real simple, and it can give you a ballpark of what the federal government is going to think you ought to pay, ought to be able to contribute to go to college. Now, forget about whether you like that number or not, but the EFC is what colleges use as a proxy for a family's financial status. And when a college organizes its prices, it organizes that information around academic merit and financial need. So if we've got test score and high school GPA, test score or high school GPA, and an EFC, we've got merit and we've got need. And so you can then see all the offers shared last year by students with similar need and merit, and then you can filter it by price range. So you can get a list of students, list of colleges that were shared by students just like yours. Now, that's just a list, which is great and it's free. But if you want to get at the real information behind there, the actual prices, and start to have real serious conversations about which schools you think are worth the price they're asking you to pay, it's going to cost you, normally it'll cost you $49 one time, and you're in. It's less than the cost of one application, and you get to see the sticker price, the grants and loans that were in each of those offers, the price that that institution's actually asking you to pay now. And with an NCSA membership, we've got an arrangement with NCSA where you plug in this coupon code, NCSA 10 off, and your price to access that data is $39 instead of $49. So for $39, you can ensure that you know exactly what the prices are that those schools are offering other students just like yours before you've even started to dig. So you know that these schools are offering prices in the range that you've set. It's a tremendous relief to know that you're looking at a school you can ultimately afford. So NCSA 10 off, use that coupon code, and you can get access to this data. Now, once you get into your senior year and you've applied to colleges and you're starting to get offers back, you can use this same tool to see current year data that's being shared by students right now, same time, same season that you're in. They're also seniors, they're getting award letters, and you can use that information to start comparing the awards offers that you've got. So you start your applications in the fall, get yourself a decision, because as soon as you upload an award letter, you get access to all the data in the Tuition Fit system for free. Upload that award letter, and you're seeing now all the offers shared by similar students. So you can right away decide, you know what, this offer I've got is actually a pretty good one. I feel a lot better about taking it. Or this offer is not great because there's a bunch of other schools that are offering students just like me a much better price. I had no idea. Now you can, it's just like when you're shopping for a car, you now get information that you can use to ensure that you get the best price. So this is what Tuition Fit works and looks like, and this is how it works. This is a screenshot of a student that used Tuition Fit last year. She applied to these 4 colleges: Clark, Mount Mercy, St. Ambrose, and Southern Illinois Edwardsville. Got the sticker prices, and then in that column that says price to pay now, you can see the actual price that those schools were asking this young woman to pay. Now, traditionally, she's got 4 prices. She's got to pick from one of those. But when she shared the data to Tuition Fit, she could now see all these other offers that were shared by other students just like her. And I've sort of shortened this display so it fits on one screen. But the big thing I want you to see here is she saw Northern Illinois and Southern Illinois Edwardsville, and the price was $2,500 different. Wasn't any reason why she didn't apply to Northern Illinois. She just didn't. It's another regional school in-state. But now with this information, guess what she can do? She can either negotiate with Southern Illinois, or she can go and talk to Northern. And another thing that lots of folks don't know about the college search process, about 80% of colleges and universities, they will negotiate because they have to. And they have to because they're not making their enrollment goals, which means they're working on trying to get students all the way through the summer. So you don't have to worry about the deadlines of May 1st, and you don't have to stress about, well, they won't negotiate. Absolutely they will. And now you have the information that allows you to do that. Now, you're not going to see every single college in this data set, at least not yet. But what you are going to see is information that you can use to compare, contrast, assess value, and negotiate, have leverage with colleges that you're already talking to. And for that matter, if you see a college that you're interested in that would be a better price for you, and there's no reason to go and not look, go for it, because it's right here. Now, how to negotiate your best price. You've gotten to where you've got several schools you're still considering, you're getting close to the end of the process. You need to be able to articulate how value difference between colleges. So you're going to look at some information that I'm going to show you in a second. But you want to start talking about how, look, that school and this school, the dorms are nicer at one, but that's not really about learning. That's not going to really matter. You need to be able to start to think about comparing value and being a little bit hard on the colleges that just sort of make a claim about, well, we got fancy food. Okay, that's not going to necessarily help you be a better student. So you got to be able to start considering value differences across colleges. And one of the things that Tuition Fit allows you to do is to compare those value differences in the context of price. You might have 2 institutions where one of them seems like it might be a little bit better than the other. But if the difference in price between those 2 is $15,000 a year, now all of a sudden you're going, I think one's a little bit better, but not $15,000 a year better. Now I'm thinking, okay, maybe 3 or 4. That's where this data is really useful. So now that you're able to do that, then when you start to communicate with that college or university, you got to be able to do 2 things. One, you got to be able to describe your own financial sacrifice, and you can articulate that in lots of different ways. And then 2, you've got to be able to compare relative value over price and say to that school, look, we love your school, we appreciate your interest in our son or daughter, but we're looking at this other institution over here, and we know it's less expensive, and we just having a hard time justifying the difference in price. What can you do to help us? In the context of where we are today, where colleges and universities are scrambling for students, making that argument puts you in the best position to get a better price. And remember, you control your education. Higher education is not just an assembly line, and you're not just raw materials that are getting turned into a widget. You control your education. You can dictate whether you show up and just punch a clock, or you really engage and you go meet with your professor outside of class and you really do extra work to learn. So be willing to walk away if an institution isn't going to meet what you need them to meet in terms of value. All the things we talked about on the Tuition Fit site, they're on videos that we put up on the Learn More tab at Tuition Fit. So So you want to figure out how to sign up, go to the Learn More tab. There'll be really simple videos that'll walk you through it. Trying to make sense of the difference between the basic data that you can see as a student starting the college search process versus the more detailed data that you'd pay money for. Go to the Learn More site. Now, just a couple of things to point you toward ways to assess value and compare differences. Here's 4 of them. Look at the 4-year graduation rate. Now, you might have to go to a site called College Navigator that is run by the federal government, and it's got the data from all these institutions. Look at the 4-year graduation rate. If the 4-year graduation rate is below 50%, be a little concerned. If it's above 50%, that's a little bit better. And if you're comparing 2 schools and the graduation rate in 4 years is 70% at one school and 25% at another, well, that matters. That says a lot about how quickly they're able to get you out of there and the degree to which you're maybe going to end up paying 5 years of tuition. It's a lot of money. The second thing, job placement rates. Those things are on those institutions' website. They're oftentimes going to be in the Career Center's website. But look for an institution where the job placement rate is above 90%. And if you know what you want to study, and that's a big if, but if you know what you want to study, talk to the individual departments about their job placement rates. Third, academic programs that prioritize internships understand that learning really changes, really becomes, permanent when you've had a chance to apply what you've learned in a real life setting. And that's what internships do. Community service can also do that if it's done right, but there are some academic programs where they just got a list of classes and you take them and then you're done. There are other academic programs where they say, no, you're going to do an internship. We're going to find a way to get you to have an experience in the real world where you're plugging in what we've taught you in classes and having to learn how to do that in real life. That's something that's worth finding. And then last, does the institution's Career Center meet with freshmen? You might wonder about that, but look, the Career Center used to be a place where you just showed up to write your resume as a senior. But nowadays, in order to have a resume that really is powerful, you got to have experiences as a junior, so you can put those on the resume. And in order to have those experiences as a junior, you have to have done other stuff as a sophomore that allows you to compete for those things as a junior. And so as a freshman, you got to put yourself in a position to get those experiences you want as a sophomore, which means you need to be talking to people in the Career Center during your freshman year. Now, some institutions, they do a great job of that. Other institutions, never occurs to them. So look at that institution. Ask the people in the Career Center, how often do you meet with freshmen? Do you prioritize that? So if you look at those 4 things, now you're starting to look at value. And if you look at the price tag that that institution's charging people just like you, and then you use these 4 criteria, you're really going to start to be able to assess value. Maximize value, minimize price. So, during the webinar earlier this week, there was a lot of questions. And just because you're watching a recording of this, doesn't mean you shouldn't get to hear some of those questions. So, I went back, found all those questions, put them on a sheet, and I'm going to read through them and try to answer the ones that really jumped out. If you have additional questions and you want to shoot me an email or you want to call me, I will put that information on the screen here in just a little bit. All right, the first question. Do you think Merit-Aid this fall will be different? In which way do you think it'll trend? There's a lot of conversation about whether COVID-19 and all of the crazy stuff that's gone on in the last 6 months is going to change the way that higher education institutions organize their aid. So one of the big mistakes that I think most people make is they sort of think higher education institutions is sort of a monolith. Every institution is like the other, and they're not. Institutions vary wildly, and there's the Harvards of the world, and then there's the tiny little college in the middle of Iowa, and they're 2 totally different animals. So with that said, There are absolutely some institutions that have lived and breathed on being really selective. And now those institutions are struggling. And so those institutions may very well start throwing out merit aid offers that are a lot sweeter than they used to be. And at Tuition Fit, we saw all kinds of data this year where students got second and third offers from institutions that just sweeten the pot. Pretty amazing. But then there's other institutions where, no, the price was already pretty good and they didn't change things at all. So you're going to see a lot of variation there. And I just think that this next year it's just going to be crazier. And it'll be even more important to be looking at schools where you know what their price range is going to be. And given that we have all this data from this current year, this year where the students that are starting college this week or next week shared information with us, you're going to start to be able to see the institutions where the price range is something that fits your price range or doesn't. One person asked a question about institutional solvency and some schools that are going under because can't make it in this environment. How do you identify an institution that might be in financial trouble? Frankly, I think it's a really hard thing to do because some of the institutions that have gone under looked pretty good, really, but they made some other really stupid mistakes. Now, the reality is that there'll probably be some institutions that go out of business in the next year or two. And for most of us, there'll be institutions you've never heard of anyway. There are 4,400 colleges and universities around the country. You probably can think of 10, 20 if you're really working at it. So, yeah, there's some institutions that might be in trouble, but the likelihood that you're actually looking at one of those, probably pretty small. Now, there are a couple of questions about Tuition Fit specifically. The question was that price I mentioned, $39, is that a monthly fee or is that a lifetime fee? That $39 fee is a one-time lifetime fee. Once you pay that, you've got access to that data as long as you want. So it's just a one-time fee. And the other question was, does it really take into account both financial need and merit? And yes, it does, because we're capturing both test score and high school GPA to get after merit, and EFC, which is what institutions use to assess need. And even if an institution is a CSS profile institution, and some of you know what that means, that's much more selective institutions. The CSS profile is really an EFC on steroids. So the EFC is a great starting point, even in those situations. All right, so a couple of questions from folks who are up in Canada. They were asking about whether this works for Canadian students or not. Now, people can come to Tuition Fit and use it to look at broad ranges of institutions, but Tuition Fit isn't set up right now for international students. We don't have a specific way to track that information, and because of privacy rules across the country, across the world, that becomes an issue. So right now, it's not set up for international students, and we're trying to fix that. If you have specific questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. When I was a coach, I recruited Canadians all the time, so I know that world pretty well. All right, another question here. What about starting salaries? Because that's the other half of thinking about ROI. There are two really pretty good sites that you can go to and look at starting salary information. One is PayScale, and the other one is Glassdoor. They're not the only ones, but there are a couple of good data sets there at PayScale and Glassdoor. Now, when you're beginning the college search, be very careful about getting too focused on starting salaries for people in a particular major, because 3/4 of students end up graduating in a degree that's different than what they knew to be so when they started college. That's because they either changed their major during college or because they came into college undecided, which is essentially just not knowing. So you can't really look for a college by major if you're undecided, right? So looking at starting salaries, you got to take that with a grain of salt. But in order to make use of that starting salary data, you really have to start out by saying, well, what am I paying to then be in a position to assess whether the ROI, the return on investment, being the salary I'm going to make, is worth it. Tuition Fit's focused on the price you're going to pay to go to college, and showing you what other students are being asked to pay, so you can put your information in context and start to make better decisions. So get that information on salary if you want it, but then put that in the context of the prices that are out there. Okay. One person asked the question about if you have multiple kids in college, how can you still use Tuition Fit? Absolutely. Because when you fill out an EFC estimator, they ask you how many kids do you have in college, and your EFC gets adjusted if you've got multiple students in college. So somebody with multiple students in college will have a lower EFC than somebody who's exactly the same on everything else except for they only have one kid in college. Okay? So Tuition Fit works that way. Another question that somebody asked was, what if we don't qualify for a need-based aid? Totally fine. Because colleges and universities organize their prices by need and merit. And then if a student is above the thresholds for qualifying for state-based need, they might, or federal-based need, they still might qualify for some institutional need. But more to the point, they still assess what they think that student can pay and organize their prices accordingly. So if you're a student that's looking for institutions that give lots of merit aid because you think you don't qualify for need, well, that's fine. Tuition Fit's going to essentially show you that information. And the thing we're trying to do is cut to the chase. Because on some level, I don't think you really care whether the money you get as a scholarship package came from a need bucket or a merit bucket. You just want more of it so that your price comes down, right? And Tuition Fit's really focused on just getting to what's the actual price that you're going to be asked to pay in the fall. On your bill, what's that price going to be? We're going to throw out the work study, we're going to throw out plus loans, we're going to throw out a bunch of stuff that isn't real, and get to what's the dollar amount that's going to be on that bill, because that's what most people care about. Okay, so those were a lot of the questions that folks asked as we went through this webinar when we recorded it, or when we broadcast it a couple of days ago. This is now the recording of it, because now we've got a little bit better technology than we had a couple of days ago here in Iowa. If you have other questions, please email me at mark@tuitionfit.org. You can call me on my Google Voice number, 563-293-6941. You can track me down on Twitter. You can track us down on Facebook. But we're focused on helping you be able to get rid of all of that fog that's about trying to figure out, is this a school that I can actually afford? What's the real price? And just get to a point where you can know that the colleges and universities you're looking at are going to be in your price range. Because that will solve so much stress, and that will make this process so much easier for you. So, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this recorded version of the webinar. I look forward to talking to you again. I look forward to hearing from everybody, and have a great night.